SABC News economics reporter Nosipho Radebe live in Sandton for us this evening, attending the B20 event. That's the Africa Business Summit in Johannesburg. It spotlights basically the continent's central role, if you will, in the global economic dialogue, and is hoping to bring together Africa's most influential voices in order to help explore the forces reshaping its future and accelerating its impact on the world economy. So lots to consider at that gathering tonight. Nosipho, speak to us about its importance in the broader scope of the G20 events and ultimately the Leaders Summit at the end of the week.
A very good evening to you, as well as our listeners or viewers rather. Of course, today coming to you live from the Africa Business Summit taking place as we gain momentum towards the all-important G20 Leaders Summit, which will be taking place in Nasrec. But the importance, of course, of this sideline event to the B20 event is that this event, of course, will hear from business leaders, various CEOs talking to us about the sort of economic story around Africa. And today, opening the session was the PIC's CEO, Patrick Dlamini. And he was very positive about South Africa, in particular South Africa's growth story, especially off the back of the S&P upgrade, as well as South Africa coming off the grey listing, especially South Africa coming off the FATF grey list. But those are just some of the positives that he pointed out in terms of the positivity when we look at South Africa's growth story. But I'm going to bring in an analyst, Makwe Masilela of Makwe Fund Managers, just to sort of outline some of the positives that came out today. Makwe, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. As I outlined here, we heard from Patrick Dlamini, the CEO of the PIC, talking to us about South Africa's market performance. He's quite positive about that.
Definitely, and it all makes sense. And it's not about just the grey listing issue. It's not about being the ratings agency, S&P. It's all about that Africa continues to be the last frontier. It continues to be like, if you look at our markets, we are still much cheaper valuation-wise versus our international peers. And one has to remember that some of these markets, especially the US markets, they were mainly driven by AI, and our local post doesn't have the necessary exposure when it comes to AI, but we've been helped mainly by our resources, and it's something which is kind of lasting, because if all these things gets over, sanity starts to prevail, all this uncertainty gets to be removed, then definitely there should be some economic growth, then there will be demand when it comes to our minerals. And bear in mind that, as much as we are giving over the presidents of the G20, we should and will be able to continue to advocate whatever we've prioritized, because we are still members of the G20. We're still able to push those things when it comes to some international and regional forums. So it's not game over for us. We'll continue to play a crucial role.
And just looking at the PIC, they are embroiled, or they have some governance issues. Their CIO recently placed on precautionary suspension, Makwe. From an investor perspective, how does dealing with corruption play out?
It's very critical. It's just like the rule of law, because you want that form that if things don't work out, you know where to go. You also want to be sure that whatever information you are getting from those companies is definitely the right information. Things are done above board. So it's important, and I lead by example, that if they suspect something, they immediately act on it. And we all know they're not saying the guys are guilty, but they're saying just step aside so that we can investigate.
And then finally, we heard before saying that, South Africa, he wants to ensure that our G20 presidency is not something that we can leverage off. Talk to us about that.
Definitely, because number one, we had an opportunity to set the tone, and as we said, as per our priorities, and those priorities, we should still be able to continue to advocate for them. And the most important thing, it's the issue to these low or maybe struggling economies, the governments thereof, because if you look at what we're paying for when it comes to debt, let alone the debt servicing cost, is just quite huge. So why we as Africa, and South Africa included, we continue to be able, to borrow money at these expensive or high rates? That has to be looked into.
And Makwe, AI, the youth, of course, pioneering that AI boom. Talk to us about that.
definitely it's very critical. Everyone is going that way. The issue is be careful, don't over-invest. I'm saying that if you look into these AI investments, already investors are starting to question, when are we going to start seeing the returns? So just like any other investments, don't just go overboard, just take calculated risk, but a very important component of the economy going forward. But it's important to start seeing the returns on investments.
All right, Makwe, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. That was Makwe Masilela there, the CIO at Makwe Fund Managers, just helping us unpack, Tembekile, some of what has come out today from the initial sort of presentation ahead of tomorrow's full-day summit of the Africa Business Summit taking place here, as we, of course, gather some momentum ahead of that all-important G20 Leaders Summit taking place this weekend.